The Permian period lasted from approximately 299 to 251 million years ago and was the last period of the Paleozoic era. During this time, the Earth was dominated by a supercontinent called Pangaea, and the climate was hot and dry. When the early Permian epoch began, many animal lineages had just a few varieties and genera. As the environment grew warmer, these lineages gradually expanded into new varieties and subspecies. In this video, we are gonna look at some of the most fascinating animals that ruled the Earth long before dinosaurs. Diictodon was a genus of therapsid, roughly 45 cm 18 inches long. These mammal-like synapsids lived during the late Permian period, approximately 255 million years ago. Fossils have been found in Africa and Asia. This small herbivorous animal was one of the most successful synapsids in the Permian period. Diictodon had disproportionately large heads that ended in a horny beak. Both males and females had a pair of tusks sticking out from the upper jaw, with those of the male being slightly larger. Diictodon had strong arms and legs, as well as 5 sharp claws on each hand, and may have had keen sense of smell and sight. Their gait was similar to the high walk of crocodiles. It had many adaptations for digging, such as highly developed muscles, a cylindrical body, and wide hands. As a therapsid, Diictodon shared many features with modern-day mammals, and most noticeably, they made burrows into the earth. These burrows could be up to 1.5 meters, 5 feet deep. Many scientists believe that Diictodon lived like the modern gopher. This could have been used to escape the heat of the desert, which was the dominant environment on the continent of Pangaea in the late Permian period. Inside these burrows, nests have been found where Diictodon skeletons are present. They were social and gregarious creatures and lived together with numerous burrows in 500 square meters of space. However, their burrows were unconnected and did not form any large colonies. Mesosaurus was the odd duck among its fellow prehistoric reptiles of the early Permian period. For one thing, this slender creature was an anapsid reptile, meaning it did not have any characteristic openings on the sides of its skull rather than a more common synapsid. Mesosaurus was one of the first reptiles to return to a partially aquatic lifestyle from its fully terrestrial forebears like the prehistoric amphibians that preceded it by tens of millions of years. It was around 1 meter 3.3 feet in length, with webbed feet, a streamlined body, and a long tail that may have supported a fin. It probably propelled itself through the water with its long hind legs and flexible tail. Its body was also flexible and could easily move sideways, but it had heavily thickened ribs, which would have prevented it from twisting its body. The most important thing about Mesosaurus is where it lived. The fossils of this prehistoric reptile have been discovered in eastern South America and southern Africa, and since Mesosaurus lived in freshwater lakes and rivers, it clearly could not have swum across the expanse of the southern Atlantic Ocean. For this reason, the existence of Mesosaurus helps support the theory of continental drift. There is the now well-attested fact that South America and Africa were joined together into the giant continent Gondwana 300 million years ago, before the continental plate supporting them broke apart and drifted into their current positions. Diplocaulus was an early amphibian that lived 270 million years ago during the Permian era. It was discovered in Texas in 1878 and given its name by Edward Drinker Cope in 1877. It was an aquatic amphibian that grew up to 3 feet 0.9 meters long and weighed as much as a cat. Unlike other reptiles and amphibians at the time, Diplocaulus was fully adapted to a water lifestyle. They had minute legs that were ineffective and boomerang-shaped head and long, thin body. The flattened shape of its head has led scientists to suggest that it may have been used for swimming, possibly acting as a hydrofoil to help the animal move through the water more efficiently. Despite their unusual appearance, Diplocaulus were successful predators, feeding on a variety of aquatic invertebrates and small fish. They were likely ambush predators, lying in wait for their prey before striking with lightning-fast movements. Like other amphibians, the Diplocaulus was oviparous and laid eggs in water. The young hatched from the eggs and completed their development in water. There is little information about nesting, number of eggs, but one thing for sure is that they also used the boomerang-shaped head to attract mates through head butting. Secodontosaurus is an extinct genus of therapsid, a group of synapsid reptiles that includes the ancestors of modern mammals. These creatures lived during the late Permian period, approximately 260 million years ago, and were among the dominant predators of their time. Secodontosaurus was a medium-sized animal with an average length of around 6 feet. It had a powerful jaw with sharp teeth, which it used to catch and eat a variety of prey, including smaller reptiles and early mammals. The name Secodontosaurus means cutting-toothed lizard, reflecting the creature's impressive dentition. One of the distinctive features of this prehistoric monster was its upright posture. Unlike many other therapsids, which had sprawling limbs, it had a more vertical stance, with its leg positioned directly beneath its body. This allowed it to move with greater speed and agility, making it a formidable hunter. Fossils of Secodontosaurus have been found in North America, particularly in the southwestern United States. These fossils have provided important insights into the biology and evolution of therapsids, shedding light on the origins of modern mammals. The climate in the Permian period was variable, and there were long periods where the otherwise desert-like conditions were replaced by a humid and steamy swamp environment. Down in the swamps of the Permian period, Eryops could be found, which closely resembled a huge toad. But even though Eryops belonged to a distant branch of the same family as today's amphibians, frogs and toads, it was far from similar to the cute little toads. Eryops lived approximately 290 to 270 million years ago. These creatures were among the largest amphibians of all time, with some specimens growing up to 6 feet in length. Eryops had a stout, powerful body and short, strong legs, which were well suited for swimming and crawling through muddy riverbanks. Its skull was large and flattened, with eyes located on the top of the head, giving the creature a broad field of vision. Eryops was a 200-kilogram predator with an abnormally large mouth filled with pointed teeth. The anatomy of its huge mouth suggests a method of feeding in which the animal would clutch its prey and thrust forward, throwing the prey further back into its mouth. It's only because Eryops primarily lived in and around water that it didn't come into conflict with the other top predator of the time, Dimetrodon, which was more dominant inland. Ophiacodon, meaning snake tooth, is an extinct genus of synapsids that lived from the late Carboniferous to the early Permian in North America and possibly Europe. Ophiacodon had a long, slender body with 4 legs positioned directly beneath it, giving it a more upright posture. Its head was elongated with sharp teeth that were well suited for catching and eating small prey, such as insects and other small animals. Fossil evidence suggests that it may have been an active hunter, chasing down its prey with speed and agility. It may have also been a scavenger, feeding on the remains of dead animals. Ophiacodon was one of the most successful pelycosaurs of its time, with fossils found on almost every continent. It is believed to have evolved into a number of different species over time, with some larger and more heavily built than others. Edaphosaurus is an extinct genus of synapsid reptile that lived during the late Carboniferous and early Permian periods, approximately 310 to 280 million years ago. At first glance, Edaphosaurus looks a lot like a scaled-down version of its close relative Dimetrodon. Both of these ancient pelycosaurs had large sails running down their backs, which helped to maintain their body temperatures, and were probably also used to signal the opposite sex for mating purposes. Oddly enough, though, the evidence points to the late Carboniferous Edaphosaurus having been a herbivore and Dimetrodon a carnivore, which has led some experts to speculate that Dimetrodon regularly had big, heaping portions of Edaphosaurus for lunch. Except for its sporty sail, which was much smaller than the comparable structure on Dimetrodon, Edaphosaurus had a distinctly graceless appearance, with an unusually small head compared to its long, thick, bloated torso. Like its fellow plant-eating pelycosaurs of the late Carboniferous and early Permian periods, Edaphosaurus had a very primitive dental apparatus, meaning that it needed a whole lot of intestines to process and digest the tough vegetation it ate. Lystrosaurus is an extinct genus of decenodont therapsids, which lived during the early and middle Triassic period, around 260 to 240 million years ago. It was a medium-sized herbivore, about the size of a large dog, with a beak-like mouth and a barrel-shaped body. The most impressive thing about Lystrosaurus is how widespread it was. The remains of these Triassic reptiles have been unearthed in India, South Africa, and even Antarctica. The teeth of Lystrosaurus were adapted for grinding and crushing plant material with broad and flat molars that would have allowed it to efficiently process tough vegetation. Based on the available evidence, it's believed that Lystrosaurus had a relatively simple digestive system similar to that of modern herbivores such as cows or deer. It would have ingested large amounts of plant material, which would have been broken down by bacteria in its stomach and intestines. The nutrients would then be absorbed and used to fuel the animal's metabolism. Why was Lystrosaurus so successful when so many other genera went extinct? No one knows for sure, but there are a few theories. Perhaps the unusually large lungs of Lystrosaurus allowed it to cope with plunging oxygen levels at the Permian-Triassic boundary. Scutosaurus was a large herbivorous reptile that lived during the late Permian period around 260 to 250 million years ago. It was a massive animal with a body length of up to 3 meters 10 feet and a weight of over a ton. Its body was covered in thick bony plates, which provided protection from predators such as the apex predator Gorgonopsid. Based on its heavily armored body, it's believed that Scutosaurus was a slow-moving animal that relied on its armor for protection from predators. Its short legs suggest that it was not particularly agile or fast-moving. Scutosaurus is also believed to have been a social animal, as fossil evidence suggests that it lived in herds. The herds may have provided protection from predators and allowed the animal to cooperate in finding food and water. In terms of its diet, Scutosaurus was primarily a herbivore. It had a beak-like mouth that was adapted for clipping vegetation, and its teeth were suited for grinding plant material. Based on its anatomy, it's believed that Scutosaurus fed on a variety of low-lying vegetation such as ferns and horsetails, as well as other plant material that was available in its habitat. In terms of reproduction, little is known about the mating habits of Scutosaurus. However, based on its large size and armored body, it is likely that it was a slow-growing animal with a low reproductive rate. Scutosaurus was a dominant herbivore during its time, but its extinction at the end of the Permian period was likely due to a combination of factors, including climate change and competition from other herbivorous reptiles. Estemmenosuchus was a genus of herbivorous therapsids that lived during the middle to late Permian period around 270 to 250 million years ago. It was a member of the group known as Diictodons, which were characterized by their beak-like mouth and the presence of a pair of large tusks in their upper jaws. Estemmenosuchus was a medium-sized Diictodon with a length of around 2 to 3 meters, 6 to 10 feet. Its body was covered in bony plates and spikes, which provided protection from predators. Its beak-like mouth was adapted for clipping vegetation, and its tusks were likely used for defense against predators and possibly for display during courtship. Based on its anatomy, Estemmenosuchus is believed to have been a slow-moving animal that fed on low-lying vegetation, such as ferns and horsetails. Its teeth were suited for grinding plant material, and it likely had a relatively simple digestive system similar to that of modern herbivores. In terms of behavior, little is known about the social habits of these prehistoric creatures, although it is believed that it may have lived in small herds. Like other Diictodons, Estemmenosuchus was likely a burrower, digging tunnels in the ground for protection from predators and temperature regulation. Fossil evidence suggests that Estemmenosuchus had a high metabolic rate and was able to maintain a relatively constant body temperature, indicating that it may have been endothermic, warm-blooded to some extent. Dimetrodon is mistaken for a dinosaur more often than any other prehistoric reptile. But the fact is that this creature, technically a type of a reptile known as Paleozoic, lived and went extinct tens of millions of years before the first dinosaurs had even evolved. Dimetrodon was a large animal with a length of up to 4 meters, 13 feet, and a weight of up to 250 kilograms, 550 pounds. It had a distinctive snail-like structure on its back formed by elongated spines that were supported by bony struts. The snail may have been used for thermoregulation as well as for display and species recognition. Dimetrodon was a carnivore with large teeth and jaws that were adapted for killing and eating prey. Its diet likely consisted of a variety of animals including fish, amphibians, and other reptiles. Dimetrodon was a dominant predator in its ecosystem, but it coexisted with other predators such as the apex predator Gorgonopsid. The skull of Dimetrodon certainly looks monstrous, but if you look behind its eye socket, you can see something that immediately tells you who its closest relative were. There is a single large hole there called the temporal fenestra, and it was the place where some of the lower jaw muscles attached to the skull. The number of these holes in this part of the skull can immediately tell a paleontologist what kind of animal they are looking at. Dinosaurs have 2 holes in the same area and are called diapsids. The possession of just one of these holes defines a group of vertebrates called synapsids, the group to which modern mammals including you and I belong. Inostrancevia was a massive animal with a length of up to 4.3 meters and a weight of around 500 kilograms, 1,100 pounds. It had a short, wide skull with massive jaws that contained a pair of curved saber-like teeth in its upper jaw. These teeth were likely used for killing and eating prey and were capable of delivering a powerful bite. It was one of the largest carnivores of the Permian and would have filled the ecological niche that big cats fill today, like the tiger and jaguars. Based on its anatomy, Inostrancevia is believed to have been a powerful and agile predator that hunted a variety of prey including other therapsids and possibly even small dinosaurs. Its massive jaws and strong teeth were capable of crushing bones, allowing it to access the nutrient-rich marrow inside. Fossil evidence suggests that Inostrancevia was a fast runner with powerful leg muscles and a flexible spine that allowed it to make quick turns and changes in direction. Inostrancevia is an important species in the study of therapsid evolution, as it represents one of the apex predators of the late Permian ecosystem. Moschops was one of the largest herbivores of its day, with only Jonqueria being a potential size rival. The upper bone in the skull of Moschops was roughly 10 centimeters thicker than any other known animal of its day. One theory for this skull thickness is that Moschops took part in head-butting and dominance contests. Based on its anatomy, Moschops is believed to have been a slow-moving animal that fed on low-lying vegetation. Moschops was not a runner and could not rely upon either speed or agility to escape predators. Still, a fully grown Moschops would have been nearly twice as big as most of the known South African predators of the mid-Permian, with the exceptions of Anteosaurus and possibly Jonqueria. In terms of behavior, Moschops was likely a social animal that lived in small herds. Fossil evidence suggests that it was a burrower, digging tunnels in the ground for protection from predators and temperature regulation. Moschops may have also used its burrows for hibernation during periods of extreme weather or food scarcity. Cotylorhynchus was a very large synapsid that lived in the southern part of what is now North America during the early Permian period. Cotylorhynchus was a massively built animal with a disproportionately small head and a huge barrel-shaped body. It probably was one of the largest of all non-mammalian synapsids, if not the largest. It could grow to lengths of 4 to 7 meters and could achieve weights of up to 2.2 tons. Their skulls are distinctive in the presence of large temporal openings and very large nostril openings, which could have been utilized for better breathing or may have housed some sort of sensory or moisture-conserving organ. The barrel-shaped body must have housed large intestines, suggesting that the animal had to feed on a large quantity of plants of low nutritional value. Anteosaurus is a genus of large mammal-like reptiles that lived during the Permian period 266 to 260 million years ago. The Anteosaurus lived in a region that is now the present-day South Africa. It had a semi-aquatic lifestyle similar to that of present-day crocodiles. However, the Anteosaurus is not related to crocodiles. All members of the genus died off during the Middle-Late Permian, and they have no living descendants. Anteosaurus was a massive animal with a length of up to 5 to 6 meters and a weight of around 500 kilograms, 1,100 pounds. It had a short, wide skull with massive jaws that contained a pair of curved saber-like teeth in its upper jaw. These teeth were likely used for killing and eating prey and were capable of delivering a powerful bite. Based on a comparison with some other dinocephalians, there are indications that it might have lived in environments closer to water. In addition, features such as a long tail, weak limbs, and the sprawling posture of the Anteosaurus have led scientists to conclude that they lived as predominantly semi-aquatic animals. Despite its massive size, the Anteosaurus was most likely a fast and agile animal. It had a well-developed senses, including a large inner ear. Also, the section of the brain that coordinates eye movement was large, which means this reptile would have been great at tracking prey. These findings led scientists to conclude that it was an apex predator that was capable of swift hunting and fast strikes. The Anteosaurus, along with other synapsids, were among the most dominant groups of animals on the planet during the Middle to Late Permian period. They flourished for millions of years. However, they were most likely wiped out by the Permian-Triassic mass extinction about 250 million years ago. Prionosuchus is a large carnivorous temnospondyl amphibian from Middle Permian, Brazil. It is known as the largest amphibian that ever lived so far. This giant carnivore would likely have preyed on various fish and land vertebrates that were unfortunate enough to drink from the water Prionosuchus was wading in with open jaws and over 60 razor-sharp teeth. The size of this giant amphibian was said to be 8 to 10 meters long until new studies showed that the reconstruction of this creature was much smaller. Prionosuchus would have laid its eggs in water like modern-day amphibians. Due to its smaller limbs, it would have spent much of its time in water waiting for its food to come to take a drink. Due to its size, it would have been able to take nearly anything that came near its lake. Fossil evidence suggests that Prionosuchus was a strong swimmer with a long, powerful tail and webbed feet that allowed it to move quickly through the water. Prionosuchus is an important species in the study of amphibian evolution, as it represents one of the largest and most successful predators of the early Permian ecosystem.